Hello and welcome back to the ThunderWizard.com YouTube channel. Another live Q&A session, and today we're going to be talking about the Saturn Moon Matrix. I've been getting some requests to talk about this, and I actually find this subject very intriguing. And I think it's important that we examine this because, listen, any belief system that really gains a foothold in people's minds, it's because there's some truth to it. And for somebody who really wants to understand the human condition, it's extremely important that we understand what the Saturn Moon Matrix theory is trying to reveal and expose. Because, even though I've said things that, some people might see as me trying to debunk that theory, there's actually truth to it. There is a Saturn Moon Matrix. And it does have an effect on the human mind. But I'm telling you right now, it's probably not what you think or what you've been told. So I want to ask you a question before I go into any teachings. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to monitor your thoughts and your reactions to what I'm going to teach you based on these questions. The first one is, now be honest. Nobody's judging you. You don't have to pretend to be anything for anybody. You don't have to reveal the truth of this. You can be honest with yourself. If you're honest with yourself about these questions, you'll be able to get a lot more out of this teaching because it will open your mind to be able to understand some of these concepts which may be difficult for people on both sides of the issue. The question is, do you have fear in your life? Be honest. Are you afraid of anything? Are you afraid of global warming? Are you afraid of the government? Are you afraid of aliens? Are you afraid of archons? Are you afraid of disease? Are you afraid of taxes? Are you afraid of the IRS? It's only human to have these. But ask yourself, do you have these fears? The next question I want to ask you is, are you happy? And I don't mean in the new age fluffy bunny, everything is light and love and I'm positive. I mean, are you fulfilled in your life? Because how you answer those questions is going to have a great impact on how you view this theory and how you interpret it. Now, I am going to give you some interpretations that maybe you haven't heard before. But I need to start off this Q&A by explaining to you that the Saturn Moon Matrix, there is a reality to it. And both Saturn and the Moon working together have very strong impacts on our mind and on our emotions. And how our mind filters reality is going to reveal everything about how your life flows for you. And it is important that we understand this. So what I want to do is I want to examine the Saturn Moon Matrix theories. I want to talk to you about what Saturn and the Moon are, what they have represented in the past, and what you need to know in order to avoid the trap of the Saturn Moon Matrix. Okay? So I will be taking questions, so you can ask questions. It's probably going to take a while for people to get online here, so I'm going to do a little bit of business here while I check to see if there are any questions and how I want to start off, how I want to talk about this. So do me a favor, take a look at this picture of Saturn. This is a painting of the god Kronos. And just how is it that you react? What do you relate to when you look at this picture? Okay, so this idea of Saturn being an oppressive, evil, destructive force, and an inescapable force that literally consumes you. And if you notice that there's that Kronos there, Saturn is devouring an infant. And that's, that's there for a reason. It's because we identify as infants. We don't identify as adults. That's why there's not a picture of an adult being consumed. There's an infant being consumed by Saturn. And a lot of the theories behind reptilians and the Saturn moon matrixes, you'll hear about children whose energy is being devoured, either by people or by the Illuminati or by reptilians, because, and we don't really talk about human beings when people, like, the whole Pizzagate thing, they didn't talk about normal adult human beings, it was about children. And as you know, the Pizzagate, there was nothing to that. If you don't know what Pizzagate was, there was this theory that was going, it wasn't a theory, there was this supposed news that was going around the internet saying that underneath a pizza parlor were politicians, including Hillary Clinton and others, who were ritually abusing children and stealing their energy in satanic rituals. And some guy took it so seriously, he believed that it was identified what the pizza place was. The guy broke in there with a shotgun and was going to shoot the place up, and he was going to go free the children, until he found out that there was no basement under there and that there was no truth to it. But that feeling, that symbolism of evil adults who have all of the power in the whole world, these weren't just powerful adults, these were the Illuminati who are running the world, and they were feeding off of the innocent blood of children. We respond to those stories because we identify with the children. That's why we get so upset by it, because what are children? Children are the highest of consciousness on this planet, which would be human beings in physical form, but they have no capability to defend themselves, and they are pure feeling. They don't even have the ability to protect themselves from their own feelings. They cry at the drop of a hat. They get hungry, they get lonely, they get scared, they get uncomfortable, they get cold, they cry. It is so easy for them to feel pain, to feel vulnerability. We relate to them, and I am talking this way because I want you to relate to that part of you. If you can't get honest with your own vulnerabilities, it's going to be difficult for you to really comprehend what it is I'm going to say. That's why I asked you in the beginning, do you have fear? It is normal for us to have fear. But when you say you don't have fear, I mean, I saw one person on there didn't have any fear. See, that sends up a red flag to me that you're in some kind of denial, or you're putting up a good front, because that's what you're supposed to do. Look at me. I'm this warrior, shaved head guy. I don't go out in public and let people know that I have fear. You know, hasn't happened for a long time, but in the past there have been times when I've been in the street and there have been people who have wanted to take my money, and you can be sure that I don't let on that I have any fear. And it has served me. I can scare people away when I want to, but you know, when I got home, I got scared. I allowed myself to have the fear. It was like, that was scary. Gosh, they could have killed me. So stop pretending you don't have fear. You have fear, you're a normal human being. So allow yourself to have it. So the best way to interact with me on this Q&A, by the way, is to ask me a question. This is a very controversial subject, so there's likelihood a lot of people are going to come on and they're going to want to dump their opinions about whatever. I'm not going to respond to people just throwing out their opinions. I can't prevent you from talking with each other or whatever, but I am going to respond to questions about this. I want to help you with this. So, let us take a look at what the Saturn moon matrix theories are. And as we do that, let's just talk about what Saturn is. So let me give you some traditional understandings of Saturn. I've shown you this one, which is Chronos, which comes from the Greek tradition. These next two pictures are going to be of the goddess Kali. And Kali has a strong connection with the planet Saturn. Kali is a deity that is directly connected to Saturn. Saturn has also been associated very strongly with the Abrahamic main deity, which is Jehovah. I find Jehovah very interesting because the name Jehovah means I am that I am. And Jehovah is so strict about his worship that you cannot even have any depictions of what Jehovah looks like. You can't worship any other deities. He makes it very clear, thou shalt have no other gods before me. He doesn't even really say in the Abrahamic tradition whether or not other gods exist, especially in the beginning. You know, later on they get more sophisticated in their monotheism, but in the beginning he doesn't deny that there are other deities. He just doesn't want you to worship them. You are only to worship the one God, Jehovah. I am that I am. He doesn't identify with anything. In fact, he says very clearly that in order to worship Jehovah, you cannot worship anything that walks on the ground, anything that lives in the ocean or flies in the air. You cannot worship any other spirits. You can only worship Jehovah. I am that I am. He doesn't connect to anything. He is so self-righteous that he cannot even tolerate the slightest imperfection, especially in human beings. Now, according to the tradition, Jehovah created human beings in his image, but for some reason that image is imperfect because human beings, with their free will, sin. And what is their sin? Their sin is to gain knowledge. So Jehovah doesn't want you to know anything. And just wanting to know something is so abhorrent to him that he has to send you to eternal damnation and punishment. So these are some aspects of how we experience Saturn. Okay, so what is the moon? Well, according to the theories of the Saturn moon matrix, the moon It may be a hollow ship. It may be a workstation. It is someplace that, as I understand it, receives, according to this belief system anyway, it receives transmissions from Saturn, which are designed to, this is really important that you understand the symbology here, that Saturn projects a frequency which is designed to trap the human mind and keep it in a false reality so that human beings can be controlled by the beings who work through Saturn, whatever that is. Now there's various belief systems out there. You've got the quasi-luminous blood over intent idea about the Saturn moon matrix, and you've got the what's his name? You've got the David Icke, who I believe is the guy who started this whole idea of the Saturn moon matrix. And again, let me be very clear. Both of these people and other people who have some of these modern understandings of the Saturn moon matrix, they are tapping into truth. Truth, they are intuiting into an unseen truth. And it is important to understand that, because if it weren't true, there wouldn't be such a strong following. People wouldn't listen to these teachings, and despite what their intellect may tell them, they wouldn't have this emotional, intuitive connection that, yeah, that's true. I feel that. I feel that to be true. I feel like I'm trapped by that. But the symbology is important. According to the understanding is that there is a frequency that is projected from Saturn to the moon, and that moon is then used to project into our minds. It's very important you understand that. Into our minds to control how we perceive our universe and how we are controlled emotionally. We already know that the brain has at the base of it the reptilian brainstem, and so it is, regardless of what you believe, everybody believes that the reptilian brainstem is the repository. It's like the antenna that picks up the vibrations of the reptilian hive mind, whatever you believe that to be. And that is what keeps us in fear, is the reptilian brainstem. Even scientists believe that. The brainstem has within it, and it's evolutionary. The first creatures that evolved were reptiles, and so we kept that reptilian brain. So according to this, reptiles were basically fight or flight. They were looking to eat or escape being eaten. That was their entire existence. And according to Michael Harner, who is pretty much the father of modern shamanism, he talks about his experience with ayahuasca, where he was learning from an indigenous tribe in the Amazon, and I believe it was ayahuasca that they gave him, or some version of it. And he had his experience where he felt himself descend through his brain. He's very clear about that. He could feel himself descending through his brain, and as he went deeper into his brain, he would experience a different reality, until he got to his reptilian brainstem, where he was sure he was going to die. So he was experiencing a lot of fear. And in that realm, when he got to the depths of his brain, in his reptilian brainstem, he saw the earth as this, if I remember correctly, kind of like a rock out in space, and these reptilian bat-like dinosaur winged dragon creatures landed. They came down and they had found the earth and were going to seed the earth and populate it, and they were very clear to him that he was going to die, according to them, and that they were the progenitors of the human race, that they had spawned the human race so that they could control them, use them, feed off of them, and they made it very clear to him that they were the rulers of outer darkness, and they were the rulers of the human race and of the earth. And then as he felt himself dying, he was able to do something to get the attention of the shamans who were watching over him, and they gave him an antidote and they saved his life. And afterwards he went to the shaman and he told him the story of, because it just affected him so deeply, that he said to them, that these reptilian creatures said that they, ruled the universe and were masters of outer darkness, and that they were going to, destroy the human race and blah, blah, blah. And the shaman laughed. He said, they always say that. So, we take from it that it's not what he's saying. He's not saying they don't exist. Because you have to understand, from the shamanic perspective, when you have a dream, you are experiencing reality. When you go to another world, shamanically, you are experiencing a level of reality. But shamans understood we live in a multiverse. We don't live in a universe, a one verse. We live in a multiverse. So he can laugh as though what that guy just said doesn't affect him, and still accept that it's true. So we live in a hologram. Within a hologram, there are going to be limitations. And what is important for you to understand is that how you are influenced by the Saturn moon matrix will dictate whether or not you are living in a finite loop within that matrix, or if you are living in the multiverse. So those of us who are living in the multiverse, we can say we have escaped the matrix. But to those of you who are still trapped in it, we're going to look like regular normal people walking around. It means that we intersect with that one limited frame of the matrix that you're trapped in. But we see and experience multiple other dimensions. But again, you can only see what your filter will allow you to see. If you take somebody who lives in a two-dimensional universe, and they'll see you in their two-dimensional universe, but you try to explain to them that you live in a three-dimensional universe, not only will they not believe you, they will not be able to comprehend it. So I'm here to give you some keys to break open your perception so you can comprehend what you might not be able to see right now. I am going to challenge some of your beliefs. I may even anger you with some of the things I'm going to say. I may even stir up some fear within you. So I want you again to look at this picture and ask yourself, are the concepts I'm going to give to you, are they going to result in you being afraid like this little infant? Or are you going to be able to see beyond that? But the first thing you have to do is you got to get honest with yourself. Stop pretending. If you are afraid, stop putting the mask that you aren't. Own up to it. Allow yourself to have the feelings. This is the great thing about awareness and consciousness, is that feelings will not destroy you. No matter how afraid you are, you can still adopt beliefs that will go beyond your fear. So what does this do for you when you think about the Saturn moon matrix? How can we avoid being that little infant? It's being helplessly, that is helpless from defending itself from being devoured by the god Kronos. So I'm going to do a little bit of business. I'll see if there's any questions, and then we'll move on. We'll talk about what Saturn really is, and what the moon is, and what the moon matrix is. Okay, so I see a lot of questions on here, which is great. So I'm going to start with Renee Petronovich. She's getting honest with some of her fears there. She's put it out there, so I'll go ahead and share it because I think it's one that a lot of us have. I certainly have had this fear. She says, I have a fear of being lonely in my old age. Yeah, that's a very frightening thought, and there certainly are a lot of people who are that. She says, there's a thunderstorm here where I am. What's the best way to utilize that energy for breaking the hold of this matrix on our minds? So that's a good question. There's a reason why I'm a thunder shaman. I'm a thunder wizard. The reason for that is because the power of thunder and lightning is designed to drive away ignorance, to drive away the giants. Kronos is a giant. Saturn would be, in the Norse mythology, would be considered a giant, would be considered a thirst, a malevolent force of nature. And so thunder, which is the god Indra, the god Thor, which is the power of electromagnetic energy. The electromagnetic force is literally what keeps the sun from burning itself out because of all the gravity. The electromagnetic force is what keeps me from falling through the chair. It prevents my hands from going through each other. It is the tiniest and yet is the strongest force. Saturn would have a close connection to what we would call gravity. And it is the electromagnetic force that is, I don't even know how many thousands and thousands of times stronger than, maybe millions or trillions of times stronger than the force of gravity. So it is the force of the electromagnetic force that actually protects us from everything. On a spiritual level, it is what protects us from exactly this force that we're talking about, this force that wants to control our minds. What a lot of people don't know is that Indra and Thor are gods of the mind. That the gods of the higher mind, not the reptilian mind, but the higher mind. When you read the mythology about Indra, it's talking about how the brain, especially the higher cortex, envelops the reptilian brain, and it literally cuts its head off, meaning that if you are in consciousness, then you can defeat the reptilian energy. But if you are in your reptilian brain, which most people are, they live out of fear. They live either from fight or flight or tend or befriend, which is you're either looking to kill something or run away from it out of fear, or you're looking to people please and gain protection from your enemies. You see people as enemies, but you think you want to be friendly to everybody. You ever known people like this? They're just they're just total, like, you know, butt kissers, but they give off a really creepy vibe. Those are people that are in their reptilian brainstem. So the god Thor, Thunar, thunder, is about conscious awareness. And the way thunder works is, as you know, after a thunderstorm, everything smells clean and pure. So working with thunder deities is a way to get yourself out of the reptilian brainstem. So the best way to utilize that energy is to use the Thurisaj rune, is one way. To any of the Thunar mantras that I've given are good ways to keep yourself protected in your higher consciousness. If you're outside and there's a thunderstorm, especially you do this the first thunderstorm in the spring, or whenever the first thunderstorm comes to wherever you live. You face that, wherever the thunder is coming from, you close your eyes, you put your hands over your navel, and you breathe in the power of the thunder. Breathe it in and hold it into your navel center, and that will be stored there for you. So is it possible to do too much matrix work in one sitting? And then she goes on to say, by that I mean, can we meditate too much on our past? I don't know about too much. But if you're talking about the work that I teach about going into your past and reliving those moments where you walked out of your integrity because of fear, and you relive that and you teach your past self what to do, how to handle that situation. I don't know about too much, but you know, spiritual work, like anything else, you know, you can get too obsessed with it. You know, we do have to relax, we do have to rest, we do have to nourish ourselves. So, you know, just make sure that you're not, you know, harming yourself with all that. Okay, so I'm now going to look for I'm reading something about somebody's actually, I don't know if you're trying to say that Pizzagate was real because pizza equals 33 in numerology. what are you saying that you know? Anyway, I don't know where to go with that. So yes, I'm looking for the oh, 33 means hoax. Well, all right. Oh, and April says it's the master teacher number. Anyway, so we've got the 3 varying opinions on the number 33. Okay, so anyway, I'm looking for a question. Again, it's not, you know, I got to be careful I don't step on people's toes because it's easy for me sometimes to do that. So forgive me if I do. I don't mean to. I am looking for some questions. April says, I'm afraid I'm the only one here and this is a fake game, meaning the Matrix. I understand that. I had that same experience when I can remember when I was either 4 or 7 years old. I can't remember which, but I remember thinking to myself that everybody around me was a robot and I was the only one that had feelings. So I think we've tapped into something here. I think this is what the Saturn Moon Matrix theory is all about. It taps us into that feeling that do we really feel any connection to anybody else? Is this just a fake game? Is this real? You know, am I the only one that is real? And I think that's a very, I acknowledge and appreciate your bravery to be able to be conscious of that and to share that. Because I think at our essence we are all having that experience, and again, that's what that picture looks like to me. There's this helpless little infant who is nothing but feelings, has no protection, pure vulnerability, and is just being mindlessly devoured by a being far more powerful than it is, with seemingly no emotion whatsoever. And in fact, you kind of get the feeling that's why it's devouring it, because it has no emotion. It's like a zombie. It wants the emotion, and the only way it knows how to get it is to devour it. That is the epitome of a psychic vampire. And that's what they do. That's what predators do. That's what, you know, all the harm they cause is they're trying to feel something. And when you know, there are serial killers. I'm thinking of one called the Iceman. And there was some kind of a, you know, a documentary and an interview of him. And when asked about it, he would say that he many times would listen to the cries and the screams of his victims because it would give him an emotional experience. It took that much of an intense emotional experience from his victims of fear and pain and, you know, horror for him to just begin to feel something on an emotional level. So that's important to know, that this is our experience with the Saturn Moon Matrix, with beings or people that we would ascribe as reptilian agents. So I think it's important that we have that understanding. Okay, so again, I'm looking. Does Saturn equal Satan? See, here's something that's a good question. I was going to get to that. Saturn does not equal Satan. There are people, you know, when you get into modern times, people have lost the understanding and the symbolism of all of these deities. And so, you know, Saturn sounds like Satan, so we go, it's Satan. Satan is something else. Satan is a concept in its original form which meant dual-minded. A shaitan was something that had a dual mind. It wasn't a being that was evil and knew it was evil and was looking to destroy others. I'm the devil. I'm going to take your soul. That's not what Satan was. Satan represents a human being or an entity that believes it is operating from righteousness. It's a split mind because it is unconscious of all of the destructive fears that it has, and that everything that it does in the name of righteousness and goodness is actually done from fear. And when you are on the other side of that, you experience that person as a mindless demon destroying you. Hitler is a good example. Hitler honestly thought he was doing what was best for the human race. We all know that he wasn't. It's just for the record, in case you have any doubts about where I come from. He was an extremely destructive, evil human being. Very, very damaged, destructive person. Among the worst that ever existed. So let me just be clear about that. But he is a shaitan because he believed he was doing the right thing. Now, apply that to yourself. I got serious and harsh with you. From crack you open, I want you to get honest with yourselves. People who live in fear do that. We all live in fear at times. We all act out destructively towards others out of our own fear. All of us do. Perfect example is the tender befriend. The person who walks around who believes that they are super friendly and super nice when in reality they are people pleasers who suck the life force out of other people because they live in this state of insecurity and fear. We have all been there. All of us. If not, you're not a human being. And part of being able to get out of the Saturn moon matrix, one of the first steps is to be able to identify your fears and how you act out on your fear and your insecurity. So any of you, if you're listening to me, if you feel afraid, if you feel insecure, good. That means that you're human. You're not a mindless bot. You're not an agent. Unless you act out of it unconsciously. Unless you stuff it down and pretend you don't have those feelings and then go outside and pretend that everything is okay, when in reality all of your actions are based out of fear. Then you become an agent. So each one of you listening to me has the potential to be an agent or a human being. Okay? We'll get into that. All right, so let's see. There's more. Yeah, the Matrix does reward fearlessness, but that doesn't mean that you pretend you have no fear. It rewards acts of fearlessness, which means that you are aware of your fears, but you take contrary action. You take actions as though you had no fear. But let me be clear, you have to acknowledge your fears. If you don't acknowledge your fears, you are destined, you are doomed to become an agent. So I appreciate the sentiment here because that's what I teach. The Matrix rewards fearlessness, so I have no fear. If you were to say, I have no fear to take action towards my highest awareness, I would like that. But when you say you have no fear because the Matrix rewards fearlessness, that tells me that there's a potential you might be lying to yourself about what fears you do have. That's not what I'm talking about. So again, I'm only taking one sentence. I could be totally wrong about that, so forgive me if I'm judging you too harshly. Okay. Okay, I normally don't look at statements, but this one looks like it's going to be funny. Actually, I'm not going to say that. I could hurt some feelings if I say that, so I'm not going to do that. Okay. Renee Petronovich says, why are people so quick to believe things like soulless people, flat earth, etc.? Because that's their experience. When you live, and we've all been there, like I said, when I was 7, I remember having this feeling that I was the only human being that was alive and everybody else was a robot. So if there are people who are absolutely convinced of that, that means that they are really feeling that vulnerability and that fear, which is normal and human. And they, because of that, because they don't know that the Matrix actually wants to serve you, because they don't know that they themselves are the creators of the Matrix, then they're trapped in their own fear virus loop. And so then that colors everything they experience. And so it's a defense mechanism. Because we can't understand, why would a human being treat us this way? Whatever it is that we have. We can't understand that. So in order to defend ourselves, we create a fantasy where people have no souls. It's coming out of, to be honest, it's coming out of a childish insecurity, which again is normal, is human. But if we want to master this matrix, we have to mature, we have to grow out of that. What about working with the moon to escape the Saturn moon matrix? I will talk about that. Satan is Saturn, who is Santa. See, again, that's kind of a childish, it sounds clever. Satan is Santa, is Saturn. It's not. That's just a clever two-dimensional, again, it's coming from that same place of, I want to make something easy. I agree with Quasi-Luminous when he says that there are symbols everywhere, but, he gets so hyper-focused on everything is a square or a circle or a cross. Well, that's because there's only so many shapes that you can draw in two-dimensional terms. Once you've gone through a square, a circle, and a cross, there's really no other shapes that you can put on a two-dimensional plane. So again, you're looking for, this is, I think, I don't think he has a complete understanding, and I think his incomplete understanding is kind of driving his insecurities and fears, and so he's seeing all this stuff everywhere because that's his belief system, and he's looking to support that. The symbols are there, but they're not that. And I'm going to talk about some of these symbols. Again, I'm not saying that David Icke is 100% wrong. I'm not saying that Quasi-Luminous is 100% wrong. I am saying they are insecure and incomplete, I should say. I am saying that they are incomplete in their understandings, and I am saying that they are operating from fear, that they themselves are operating from that which they claim to have escaped from. Why is the earth flat? A flat earth is a two-dimensional plane of existence. Two-dimensional planes of existence, everything is fight or flight. Two-dimensional. Tend to befriend. I'm trapped in a matrix, they're out there, I'm here. Two dimensions. So if that's the filter through which you see things, then you live in a two-dimensional universe. So for him, it is true he lives on a flat earth, because he's operating from his reptilian brainstem. And the unfortunate part is that he is intuiting truths. I do believe that he is destined to be a shaman, a wizard, if he can get out of his two-dimensional thinking. Because the information that he's seeing, there's truth to it, but he can only see it in two dimensions. Same thing with David Icke. You can only see it in two dimensions. Let's see. Let's see, I'm going to look for a question. Okay, I'm looking for questions again. I don't think I have seen. Quasi claims to have seen my name in the Book of Life. What is your opinion on that? Well, I can't say he's wrong. I don't know what he's seen or what he hasn't seen. I can say that without knowing him, so I'm only taking this at face value. Bear that in mind. I don't know the guy. I don't know what he's seen or what he hasn't seen. Any teacher who first off throws fear, who denigrates or talks down to students, I think is a dangerous person and should be avoided. I also think anybody who believes to have your number, I know who you are, that's a real big, if I wanted to start a cult and if I wanted to put somebody underneath me and have power over them, I would say, I've seen your name in the Book of Life. meaning that there's a book of death and only so many people get into the book of life, right? That's what he's saying, that there's a lot of people who won't get into the book of life or aren't in the book of life, but you're special because you're my student and you're in the book of life. That's a real mind trip. That's a real cult-inducing, power trip. Again, I don't know the guy. I could be wrong. But just based on what I see right there, that's my first reaction to that. Okay. Santa Claus, I don't know if Santa Claus is based on Odin, but I would say there's a lot of similarities to Odin and Santa Claus. I definitely like that idea. And then, of course, we've got these things where we have symbols that keep popping up in different forms. So it could be that there's an intuitive desire, even after Christianity took hold, there was still an intuitive desire to connect to the entity, to the essence of Odin, and so we created Santa Claus in order to keep that. Just like we keep worshiping the Christmas tree. The Christmas tree is Yggdrasil, the tree of life. This is what the Christmas tree really is, right here. And this is why our ancestors worshipped it, and this is why people still, even though they're Christians, and Christianity was designed to take away the old religion, we still worship the Christmas tree, but this is what the Christmas tree really represents. It is the tree of life, the pillar that goes through all of the worlds, goes through all of the dimensions. And this, by the way, is what the thunder wheel is, which is why I teach it. So, anyway, that was a nice little distraction there, looking at the tree of life. Anyway, let's see what we've got here. Again, I'm looking for questions. I know a lot of you guys are very smart. You're very well educated. You've got a lot of information in your brain that you want to throw out there. I am here to tell you answers to questions, so I'm not going to respond to too many just statements or opinions. But let me see here. All right. Looking for the questions again. Let's see, I'm looking for that. Luis Gregg says, what can I do to protect myself against evil? It's a really, really good question. The first thing you can do to protect yourself against evil is to get honest about your own fears. To be honest and allow yourself to experience your pains, your fears, your insecurities. Because that's where all evil comes from. All evil comes from people who are acting on their unconscious pain and fear and unresolved issues. The first thing that you can do, as I teach, if you go and watch, go and watch the first video of the shamanism certification, the shamanism certification video, where I teach you to understand what the basics of the mindset of the shaman is. The first thing is that you adopt the belief that the universe, the matrix, that everything around you, that life force energy is your friend. That everything in the universe is seeking to empower you and to help you. That if you choose to adopt a fearful attitude, and usually people do this again out of childish need to protect yourself from something you're afraid of. I'm not belittling it. If somebody goes through a traumatic childhood, even a childhood where they have they live in an unloving home, even if they're just devoid of love, they begin to create these defense mechanisms on an emotional and psychological level, which then color their experience of the world. And if you grew up in a home where it wasn't safe to have feelings, or it wasn't safe to ask for love, if it wasn't safe at all, then you create a belief system that the world is an unsafe place. When you adopt a belief system like that, this is why I say any teacher that teaches anything out of fear, you should walk away from that teacher. Because the matrix doesn't know that you don't know any better. The matrix believes that you are God. And if you adopt a belief system that you believe that the universe is out to get you, the matrix goes, oh, we can make that happen, because it thinks that's what you want. So the first thing you can do to protect yourself from evil is to understand that the universe wants to help you, wants to empower you. And the second thing is to look at your feelings, all of your fears, and be honest with yourself about your fears, your pain, your unresolved issues. And the third one is to do energy work. So that's one of the reasons that I teach energy work. You can do any of the Qigong practices that I have on my YouTube channel. You can look for the playlists that say Qigong on them. If you want a really high-level Qigong practice that is designed to do exactly what you ask, get this DVD. That can be a very transformative practice where it can be challenging, but everything I teach is designed to do that. But if you don't want to spend the money on a DVD, then just go to my Qigong playlists and do that. You can do the Huul breath, H-U-U-L. So those will energetically empower your aura, which will protect you from any negativity, whether that be biological, psychological, or spiritual. Okay? So those are some ways to do that. So let's see what else, other questions. I have consciousness about feelings and damages, but I can't break and get stronger. Why? Well, be patient with yourself, Luis. Follow my teachings. It takes time. Put time and effort into it. You can work through it, but it takes patience and discipline and consistency. So stick with me. I can help you with that. All right, let me see here. Again, I'm looking for the questions. Looking for the questions. Okay, yeah. Again, not looking for questions. Once again, I'm not seeing any. Okay, question. Can you get a bit into seethe? I think you mean seethe, right? The Norse practice of channeling, and how the power of this works to empower the individual to become the master of themselves. Well, you've got traditionally in the Norse tradition, you have seethe, which that's what in English the word seethe, to boil, is the same as seether. They always put an R on the end of things in modern Norse language, but it means to seethe, to boil. There's seethe, and then there's galder, which means chanting. Galder actually is a larger science of what the wizard is. You've got basically two paths. You've got the path of the channel, which was seethe, and you have the path of chanting, which is the wizard. So the wizard is what I'm doing now. The wizard is the person who interprets symbology, interprets mythology, who has the ability to see into things and explain them, to be a teacher. The channel, the seethe, is somebody who literally channels the entities, channels deities. So you have to have them both, because usually somebody who practices seethe may not understand what they see or what they're channeling. And you have to have that. In order to be able to channel something, you have to turn off the part of your mind that that analyzes. You have to turn that off, because you would filter that out. You say, that's not my thoughts, that's somebody else's, and you'd filter it out. So the seethe practitioner needs the shaman, needs the wizard to protect them, and also to interpret what they say. So this happens a lot with the female students that I have I am really amazed at their power. So any of my female students who's watching this, know that I have tremendous respect for your power. That you have the ability to have experiences, to have visions, and to channel energies, to prophesy in ways that I can't, because you know, I've got so much masculine energy, I don't have that ability. But they come to me and they say, what does this dream mean? What does this mean? And then I'm able to explain it. So that's the job of the wizard. The wizard knows exactly, immediately, what the meaning of something is. But it doesn't mean that I have the ability to go there and experience it. So I don't know that seed by itself empowers the individual to become the master of themselves. In fact, there's a lot of people who have that ability. If they don't connect to the ancestors, they can become schizophrenic, they can become really ungrounded. But if you have both, then you become the master of yourself. And so ideally, a true shaman, a true wizard should have the ability to do both. I mean, I do have the ability to travel to the other realms. I have to work at it a little harder than some, but I do have that ability. I do get and receive information from the ancestors, and they do answer my questions. I am able to do divination and interpret and that sort of thing. But my female students are much more powerful than I am at that. So again, I want to make sure that, you know, if that's what you mean by seeds, that's the traditional understanding. If you have a different understanding of what seeds is, then I may need to find out what that is to be able to better answer your question, in case, you know, I have a different understanding, or if I'm not understanding your question. So that's my answer to that as best I can. Plain Earth says, living in sin or sine, you mean sine wave? I don't buy into the quasi-luminous sine wave thing. In fact, I use a sine wave energy when I tap into the spell of the 9 nuts. It's the most powerful ritual I have. It's the one ritual I know of where you can, there's one ritual to go and literally change the past or the future. It's this one. And the spell of the 9 knots uses a sine wave on all of the 9. That's an important number. There are 9 energetic points along the body, and you can use energy going up those 9 or down or around the body, and you can use it in a sine wave, starting with the bottom to the top and then bouncing back until it gets to the middle. And I use that in the spell of the 9 knots. It opens up all of the doors to reality, and that's where you can go in and throw in an intention and literally create something out of nothing, change the past, change the future, change yourself. But be prepared, you will be responsible for what you create. So don't do it if you're not ready for it. So I don't buy into that. You know, again, this is just very simplistic, childish. Sign looks like sin. You know, Santa looks like Satan. That's not an understanding of language. That's not an understanding of, you know, that's just childish association. Again, it's very two-dimensional. So I don't buy into that. Question, David Magdi, what is your take on his Holy Grail mission? I have no idea what that is, so I don't have an opinion. I don't know what it is to be an illusionist. I'm not sure what you mean by that. What's your opinion on marriage? I think marriage is a great thing, if you're designed for that. I mean, I'm not religious about it. But I was talking about this with, and this goes back to the concept of seed and wizardry, which is the union of male and female. And I'll share this about something I've only seen in the Norse tradition. And I think it says something to the ancient, pre-Christian European shamanic power that it had. So all around the world, you usually have men who carry staves, like, you know, in Lord of the Rings, the Gandalf, in fact, his name means staff elf, wand elf, Gandalf. He carried a staff with him. And usually it's the men that carry the staves, because the staff is a phallic symbol and it represents authority and all that. But in the Norse tradition, the women seers were called staff carriers. Now, let's think about the symbolism of that. I don't know of any other tradition where men willingly gave their power to women and said, here, hold on to this. Because that's what a staff carrier is. She is carrying the power and the authority of the men in her tribe, which means she is entrusted with their spiritual protection. And that wherever she goes, she is carrying that power with her. So in a marriage, what happens is, in the act of lovemaking, what literally happens is the feminine surrounds the male. And what happens energetically is that when the two are really connected, really giving themselves to each other, her aura will surround him up to something like 3 feet. This is what makes him the king. This is why traditionally you wanted a king to be married. This is why to this day we want presidents to be married. Because we intuitively understand that without the power of the feminine, the masculine is nothing. So, ladies out there, if I haven't, I've got to do some more on this. You need to know that I gain my power from you and from the feminine aspect of the universe. That's where all of my power comes from. As a martial artist, when I did spirit fighting, all of my power in my fists came from the feminine. Those big, strong, tough guys who are all masculine are the easiest ones to chop down. Guys, you know this. All it takes is a look from a woman. All they have to do is just look you up and down, and that destroys us. Women, you have to understand that. If you're having trouble with your marriage, one of the first things you want to ask is, am I empowering my man? Because if you don't, it'll cut him to the bone. Guys who abuse women are men who have no power. And they're angry at the feminine because on an unconscious level, because they believe they have not been empowered. So they seek to, punish the feminine for what they don't have. You can test this out. All you need is just to get a couple people together. You can test this out. Find a beautiful woman and get a plain looking man and have her, listen to this, have him stand up, have her sit on the ground and grab his ankle, and then whisper in her ear, okay, think something negative about him. Think that he's stupid and idiotic and worthless. And then muscle test him. You'll see he'll lose all of his energy. He won't consciously know what she's thinking, but he'll lose all of his energy. And then whisper in his ear, think of him as the most successful, respectable, powerful man in the universe, and you'll see you won't be able to move his arm. This is the power of the feminine. Women, what women have forgotten in the past 2,000 years is that they don't have to tell a man what they think of him. They only have to think it. This is why men are seeking physical connection with women, because they want to be empowered. That's why they're always looking at women. Everywhere you go, guys are always looking at women. Yeah, I'm not going to say that there aren't dogs out there who don't understand and know how to respect women, but that's where it's coming from. So women, you guys have all the power. In fact, I'll give one last historical thing. When the Romans were conquering Europe, they came up to the border of the Germanic tribal area. And the staff carrier, the women's staff carriers, told the men who were armies, and the Roman army was camped away from them across a field, and I don't know what everybody was waiting for, but they were waiting to go into battle with each other. And the staff carrier women told them, do not go into battle yet. Wait, I don't know how long they said. Wait a week or a few days or something, because they were looking at the omens. And the male generals didn't listen to them and went into the battle, and the rest is history. If that battle never took place, Europe would still be operating under its shamanic heritage. We would be a completely different world. It's because the men did not listen to the women. Men, when your women, even the women in my life who have cut me down at the knees, even though they'd been, you know, if they were acting out of their insecurity and their fears and whatever, everything they've said was true. The most valuable thing my ex-wife ever said to me was, I can tell you're not happy. I want you to be self-sufficient. Then she went on to tell me what a loser I was. But the essence of her message was true. So women always know. Shakti always knows. But we have to get back into balance so that Shakti can empower us. So we have to honor them. There's a reason why we get on one knee and kiss their hand. There's a reason why we do all that stuff that our ancestors used to do when they court women. There's a reason for it. There's a reason why queens sit on the left of the king. Because the left side is the receptive side, and the Chinese know this. The Chinese will tell you that when you sit on the left of, the person who sits to the left of somebody is the person who has all the power. The person who sits on the right is the tool. Like, you know, the right arm of the king, that's the guy. Go do that. Go take care of that. Go cut that guy's head off. He's the tool. All the power comes from the left, which is the feminine. There's a reason for all of this. These are things we've forgotten. And this is one of the reasons why there are teachers out there who are not understanding the symbolism of the Saturn moon matrix as it's being, as they're intuiting them. David Icke is intuiting real truth, but he doesn't have a complete understanding. He can't teach it in its completeness. Quasi-luminous is receiving under true knowledge, but he doesn't have the power, he doesn't have the Shakti to truly interpret it. It's not my intention to badmouth anybody, I'm just telling you guys the truth as I see it. Anyway, so let's keep going. Let's go here. Looking for the questions. So I think I answered that question. Marriage is not. Ayahuasca, Temazcal. Well, I've talked about this before. Those are tools. If done in the proper setting with a master shaman, they can be helpful, but their job is to crack open your aura forcefully. Listen, it's a poison. Ayahuasca, it's a poison. You can die from it. And it really messes with your nervous system, but if done properly under the guidance of a true shaman, it can crack you open so you can see the other realms, and more importantly, it gives you direct access to your unconscious mind. That's where all the demons exist. Remember what I talked about, the reptilian brainstem? All of your fears and your nightmares live right here. So when you take ayahuasca, you're cracking that open and putting it into your reality. That's how demons come into our reality. It comes from here. This is the gate. You crack this open and they can come into your reality. And if you don't do it properly, that's when you get into trouble. I don't teach that, I don't do it, I don't recommend it, because the Vedics and the Taoists learned how to get all of the benefits of DMT without any of the negative side effects. It's called Qigong, Negong, Kundalini Yoga. You don't need to do that stuff. I recommend not to do it. But having said that, it can be done properly, but you've got to do it with a master shaman, otherwise you are not only risking your health, but you're risking your sanity and your energetic protection. You can let all kinds of crazy things into your aura if you do that without understanding it. Okay, let's see. Looking for the questions. Is it possible that a person can have an awakening or opening of the chakras without knowing anything about that kind? Yes. Can one have it organically without trying? Yes. The way to open all of your chakras is to become mature. The Kundalini and the chakras are all about emotional maturity. It has nothing to do with spiritual powers or any of that other garbage. It has to do with becoming mature. So if you want to open your chakras, become a mature person. That's why, you know, the path of bhakti, the path of devotion, the path of living your highest and treating others with consciousness and love and compassion. That is the most powerful yoga there is, because when you do that, your kundalini and your chakras will open. So get rid of the idea that opening the chakras is somehow going to give you magical, mystical, whatever. Any powers that come from that mean that those are, I've talked about this before. Let's say somebody gets the ability to heal, has the ability to touch people and heal them. It means that in a past life that they harmed people. And the people that are coming to them to be healed are people they've harmed in a past life. And what's happened is that their kundalini has opened up a past samskara. But it's not, it doesn't mean that they're spiritually advanced. It just means that they have some stuff to work through. Okay? No, I don't recommend the use of any shamanic snuff. I have no idea what that means. Just because somebody throws the word shamanic out there doesn't mean that that's... No, you don't need any external anything. Do my celestial qigong. Do my qigong practices. You'll know what I'm talking about. You'll never need any of that stuff again. All right, some things I'm just not going to respond to. All right, so let's move on with the teaching. I'm going to do some business, and then I'll formulate my next comments. Okay, so now I want to share with you, let's talk about what Saturn really is. So let me just once again state that it is true. Everything that is said about Saturn is true. Saturn does project onto the mind. Saturn does trap you. It traps you in your fears and your unresolved conscious past. It is true that Saturn is what traps you into rebirth. All of these things are true. But escaping that accomplishes nothing. I'll say it again, I've said it before. People who seek to escape the matrix are doomed to stay trapped in it. The people who don't care whether they stay or go, the people who don't care whether they get reincarnated or not, are the people who don't have to ever come back. As long as you think that you need to escape and your whole goal is to escape reincarnation, you are doomed to reincarnate, guaranteed. Comes from fear, right? Fear. I have to get out of here. I've got to get out of this matrix. I can't come back. There it is. You're stuck. You've created a fear loop in the matrix, then you'll be stuck there until you stop fearing it. Okay, so what is Saturn? Let me just give you a list of a few things of what Saturn is. First, let's take a look again at what Saturn looks like. Here are some different interpretations of Saturn in terms of deities. And we're really, when we start talking about the trap of the Saturn moon matrix, we're really talking about the north node of the moon. People don't realize that, but it's really the north node of the moon that keeps you trapped in all these really horrific, frightening slave things. But let's first, I'm going to show you some things about what Saturn looks like in different symbology, and then I'm going to give you a list of things that are associated with Saturn. So that last picture was of, I have a lot of feminine deities, and clearly there's a lot of feminine energy that wants to come out in me tonight, as you can tell. But the masculine, one of the masculine is the last one you saw, which is Mahakala. Kala means time. We are said to be living in Kali Yuga. It's not true. We actually left Kali Yuga in the 1700s. We're now in Dvapara Yuga. But we still are feeling the effects very strongly of Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga is said to be the time of darkness. So Kali and Kala also means darkness. But it means darkness of the mind. It means that the mind is trapped in darkness. And Kali Yuga is when Christianity, when Kali Yuga actually started was 2,000 years ago. And at the moment of Kali Yuga is when Christianity was introduced into the world and spread across the world, and it was Christianity that created the Dark Ages. Because actually before the Middle Ages, a lot of people, the East Indians, there were some African civilizations, and there was the Roman civilizations. They were able, they had, in some ways, they had more higher awarenesses and technologies than we do today. I mean, just the Roman aqueduct system. You know, there are things that they were able to do with their aqueduct systems that even today would be very difficult to do. The things that they built, like the domes of like the Pantheon in Rome, you know, it took Europeans forever after that to figure out how to do that. They had the mastery of understanding the concept of zero is an East Indian mathematical concept that came before, you know, while we were in the depths of our Dark Ages, we actually learned the concept of zero from the East Indians, who never left their traditional understandings. So it was that time when Kali Yuga, and it was primarily the European Christian empirical mindset that spread that darkness and is still spreading that darkness over the world. It's it comes from that time, Kali Yuga, the time of darkness. So that last representation, this one here, is how we experience the negative or the lower vibrations of Saturn. So understand that everything, including Saturn, has a positive and a negative vibration. Now, we experience the negative vibrations of things when we are living in our brainstem. When we live in fight or flight or tender befriend, then what will happen is that we have this filter that we only experience the lower vibrations of everything. So everything that people say about Saturn is 100% true. But it means that you're operating from your lower vibrational self, from your reptilian brainstem. The higher understandings of Saturn are liberation, peace. In fact, the word shani is also comes from the same root for shanti. See, now I'm playing with language correctly because I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just looking at words in front of me and going, oh, Satan looks like Santa, so Santa is Satan. That's childish, two-dimensional. There's no thought. There's nothing behind those kinds of understandings. If you're going to play with language, you got to know what you're talking about. That isn't to say that there aren't coincidences that are true. There are. But in this case, shani comes from the root shang, which means peace. The word shanti means peace. And so when you are on the higher vibrations of Saturn, it means that you have resolved your karmic debts. It means that you are no longer fighting your lessons. It means that you are no longer resisting your consciousness. Because people who push their feelings down, now this is why, remember, I started the beginning of this saying, own up to your fears. Remember that? From the beginning, I said you must acknowledge your fears. Because if you push them down and pretend not to have them, you are guaranteed to live in your fear-based brain, and then you will be controlled by Saturn, because Saturn sniffs that out. It's sniffing the universe. It is wanting to do exactly this. It is wanting to feed off of your negativity, exactly like this picture. But you have to understand what that means. It's feeding off of your unresolved, emotional, lower vibrational issues that are keeping you trapped. But you see, what we don't understand is all of our unconscious patterns that come from fear, we believe are there to protect us. So we create a protective boundary around it, which psychologists will call unconscious resistance. Have you ever known people like this, that they're on the verge of learning something, or you can see something that would really be helpful to them, or even something as simple as an alcoholic, and you say to them, you know, you should stop drinking, and they go on and on about why they don't need to stop drinking, and then they get angry and they get really protective. You don't know me. You don't know what I need. You're the one with the problems. I can quit anytime I want. That is somebody who is acting out on their unconscious resistance. Saturn smells for that unconscious resistance and then wants to do this when it smells it. If you can hear me, Saturn's main desire is to liberate you from your own self-induced prisons. But when Saturn comes in with challenging lessons, you experience it as though somebody is literally trying to tear you to pieces, and you fear it. Let's look at Kali here. Kali is a good example. When you look at the fierce form of Kali, this is why Westerners think she's the goddess of death. She's not the goddess of death. She is the goddess of liberation. The heads that she has around her neck are the demons. The demons are not out there. The demons are in you. The demons are your fear, your greed, your lust, you know, whatever other negative self-attributes, those are within you. And when you are being ruled by them, she gets full of rage and she starts to foam at the mouth because she wants to consume them. Why? Because she wants to free you. And she loves you so much that she won't stop hounding after your frailties and consuming them, even if it frightens you. Even if it creates nightmares within you. Because you're holding on to them, she is trying to take them out of your hand and consume them. That's why blood is dripping from her. That's why she has a crazed look on her face, because she is crazed with protective anger to protect you from the demons inside of you that are trying to destroy you. Now look at her again. A lot of feminine energy wanting to come through me tonight. It makes me really emotional when I see the love of the mother. Nobody loves you more than the feminine aspect of Saturn. Nobody loves you more. It's the deepest, truest love you'll ever find. Now, that's what you see when you are attached to your fears. You see Saturn coming after you like that. You see Saturn, the male aspect looks like this. The feminine aspect of Saturn looks like this. Yeah, there's a lot of feminine energy out there tonight. I don't know what that's about. I can really feel it. When you are steeped in your fear and you think you're protecting yourself, the alcoholic who's addicted to alcohol, when he or she picks up that drink and drinks it down, knowing that it's bad for them, they can't stop because on an emotional level they believe that they need it for their emotional survival. When you're in that state, Mother Kali, Mother Saturn swoops in, and what you see is that frightening goddess of death, because she is looking to kill and destroy those aspects of you that don't serve you. But if you see her that way, it means you're still attached. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that you're less of a human. We are all attached, or we wouldn't be in physical form. So you have to see her. In fact, I can remember another aspect of this is Chamundi. She's more of a Mars than a Saturn, but she has that same understanding. And I can remember when I was 17 years old and I was going through some major personal, I don't even know how I survived some of the crap I had to live through. But I remember closing my eyes and seeing next to me this skeleton female next to me in the bed, and I'd wake up and there'd be nothing there. Looking back on it, it was the feminine aspect of Mars who was looking to do that same thing. Destroy within me those things that were trying to kill me. So when you see her for her true self, then what you see is more like this. You can see the compassion within her. And the goddess Hela in the Norse tradition, which is basically the same essence as Kali. It is the goddess of the underworld. When in between lives, if you have not died in such a way where you lived in complete fearlessness, which, obviously none of us who are here have, because if I had, I wouldn't be in this physical form. When we die with unresolved desires and fears, we go to the underworld to be able to look at our unconscious issues, and then we plan out our next life. And waiting for us is the goddess Hela, who, and I'm going to get emotional here, there is no greater love in the universe than the goddess Hela. She accepts you at your worst with zero judgment. She will sit there with you no matter how horrible you are. So anybody listening to me, if you suffer from shame, if you feel shameful, if you hate yourself, if you judge yourself, you can call on Mother Hela, and she will sit with you without any judgment. And so she epitomizes the transformation, because when we are attached, we see her as a grotesque, rotting corpse. And that's because she's identifying with you and being with you at your most ugly, without any judgment. And so you project that onto her, because she is like a blank screen. And you literally project onto her what you see about yourself. And if you get to the place where you forgive yourself and you move past these unresolved desires or fears or self-directed negativity, then she becomes the most beautiful woman in the world, because then you see the beauty of your own soul in her. And so that's why she is depicted as being half corpse and half beautiful woman. There's nothing like the love of the mother. The true love of the mother, there is nothing like it in the universe. Nothing. Nothing compares to it. So, I think I've said what I need to say about that. Let's look at the negatives of Saturn and then think again about the positive of Saturn. I could also have put down there panic, because the opposite of panic is true peace. So the higher vibrations of Saturn are those positive aspects. But before we get into that, let's move on to the moon now. So we have to understand how Saturn and the moon connect. So I'm going to go ahead and do some business and look for questions, and then we'll move on to that. Okay, so there was one good question I need to answer, because that's my mistake and my limitation. I have now given a false comparison which I need to clear up. So Dean Nevin says, since Kali Saturn devours demons and resistance, why does Thor need to protect us from Kali Saturn? Well, what I'm really talking about there is the negative part of Saturn. So again, these energies, as somebody said earlier, I think Black Earth Production says that the universe is neutral. I wouldn't say the universe is neutral, but I will definitely say that it responds to us neutrally, meaning it doesn't have an agenda on us one way or another. So the way the matrix works, again, to understand how the matrix works, the matrix is this web of life force energy that has consciousness that acts like a blank screen, that reflects back to us what we intend into it. So if we're operating from our fear, the matrix doesn't know that you've forgotten your God. And if you buy into a fear-based belief system and you throw that intention, the matrix will bounce that off back to you without any judgment, because it thinks you know what you're doing. And so the aspects of Saturn that we need protection from are our own negativity. So what Thunor does, what Thor does, is he creates boundaries. Because without boundaries, we would lose our individuality. And what we're really talking about here is we want freedom. I mean, this picture, if you really think about it, what this picture represents, and anybody who's lived in any dysfunctional home knows exactly what I'm talking about. This is, you felt as though you had no protection from other people's agendas for you, whether that was they loved you and wanted you to love them, or they physically abused you, or they mentally abused you, or they judged you. It felt like this. Right? That's what it feels like. And what that means is that you have no boundaries and nobody's respecting your boundaries. And so people who grow up with no boundaries also don't have any. These become the tender befriend. People who are constantly looking to get loved and approval and can't live without somebody else's attention. It's a lack of boundaries. That's just as bad as somebody who goes around abusing people or domineering them. It's the same thing. It's the flip side of the same coin. So Thunar gives you Thor gives you the ability to have your own boundaries. That's why all of the Qigong practices that I teach have a connection to Thor. Thunder is all about empowering you and giving you boundaries. In fact, the sound of thunder is literally when the electrical charge is coming through the air. It literally splits. I don't know how it's done, but it splits the air, creates a boundary, which then, when it collapses in on itself, creates the sound of thunder. As I understand it, I could be wrong, but even if that's not true, that's a really great example of what Thor does. So Thor creates boundaries, and that's why he protects, because the more you work with Thor, the more your boundaries will become protected. In fact, if you just chant to Thor or do the Thurisaj rune mudra mantra that I have on there, if you just do that mudra and that mantra, you will find people leaving your life. They will just get up. One day they'll call you out of nowhere and say, I hate you. I can't believe you did that to me, and I want nothing more to do with you. And they'll hang up, and they'll leave your life. And you're like, what did I do? What just happened? It's because all of a sudden they sense the thunder. They sense the boundaries that are protecting you, and they leave. That's why thunder is fighting demons. Demons have no boundaries. Negativity is about lack of boundaries. Okay? All right, so I think I answered that question. Let me see if there are any more. Okay. All right, so Luis asks, why are there so many thunderstorms in Portugal? That's not man-made. No, that's nature-made. Men don't have the ability to create thunderstorms like that yet. You know, one of the things I want to address, part of the fear, a childish fear is when you give something more power than it really has. So the idea that the Illuminati are controlling the world, I'm not saying that there aren't elites who have power to manipulate things like banking and money and government, but the idea that that goes so far that you can't even trust your own physical body, where you have to go so far that you have to remove your own chakras so that some unseen entity can't steal your life force, that's a childish two-dimensional fear. You have much more power than that. Nothing can harm you without your permission. Nothing. You control everything. If you operate from your fears, you will manifest demons and entities and reptilians from your own reptilian brainstem. You will literally project them into your environment, and they will abuse you. But that's because you've created it. It's a tough thing to hear. But which universe would you rather live in? Would you rather live in a universe where there are beings that are so much more powerful than you, that they can slip through walls and take you by force into their spaceship, or that there are entities and reptilians who can, from other planets in the universe, suck out your life force through your chakras? Would you rather live in that universe, or would you rather live in a universe where you are God, that in your limited ignorance as a human being, you project your fears into your own reality? And if you wake up, you can change that. Which universe would you rather live in? There are people who would rather live in the first one because it's easier, because they're afraid and they're alone. There are people that are so lonely, they would rather live in a universe filled with evil archons that are trying to keep them trapped. The reason why you want to believe in being trapped is because you're afraid of being alone. I told you I was going to say some things that were going to piss you off and push your buttons, but go back and listen to yourself. Is that hitting a truth button in you? If you're willing to grow past that and look at your fears and go through the pain and the difficulty and the fear of all of that and move past that, You can own your entire universe. You never have to be afraid again. But you have to be willing to grow up. We all do it. I'm not judging you. I've been there. Everybody has to go through it. That's why we come into this universe. Watch my videos on the Matrix. You'll know what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. Okay, Luis, Greg, go onto my channel, thunderwizard.com YouTube channel, and look on my channel. You have to look for it. There's I have all kinds of Qigong on there. Yeah, it's spelled Qigong. Go and do that. That will help. Okay. Now we got to talk about the moon here. So let's do that. So we've talked about Saturn, and we've, by the way, somebody mentioned something about planets representing male and female. All planets have a male and female aspect to it. In Saturn, one of them is Kali, is the feminine, Mahakala is the masculine. The sun, in the Norse tradition, the sun is called Sunna, which comes from the same word of shunyata, and the Buddhists use the word shunyata. Again, this is how to use language, not just throwing words together. Shunyata means emptiness in Sanskrit, and that is the place where Buddhists want to go, where they want to reach complete Zen mind. They want shunyata. It's the place of pure primordial emptiness, where all the power is. It's the most powerful place in the universe. My ancestors, and we still use it today in English, we worship the sun. Sunna, shunyata. It's the same word. It means emptiness. At the center of the sun, hydrogen atoms are being crushed in the intense gravity of the sun. It's so intense that it crushes hydrogen atoms and creates nuclear fusion, which then explodes and creates all of the light and heat of the sun. Which is why the sunlight is so dangerous if we don't have protection. It's incredibly powerful. The other aspect of the sun is Ra. And we know that in the Norse we have the Raido rune, which is Ra. The Egyptians, the sun god was Ra, the ray. We say ray of sun, Ra. The king is called Raja. In the Germanic it was called Rix. We still have it in the word riches. Comes from kingdom, comes from king, which means the expression of the sun. The sun represents the king. That's why you always had, kings with sun, halos and all that. That meant they represent the sun, which represents the soul, which is the king of the universe. So you have a masculine and feminine of everything, all of them. So we could focus on the feminine or the masculine. Same with the moon. The moon. Okay. Sorry, the stream went offline there for a second. I'm back on now. Hopefully you guys are still there. So anyway, let's get to the moon. Here are the representations of what the moon represents. Okay, in doing research for this, I did do some research into David Icke, who I think is probably the guy who started all this moon matrix stuff. And he starts talking about ancient scriptures or teachings that talk about how Saturn influences the emotions, and so he goes on to say, well, that's because there's these aliens on Saturn who are using the moon base to project into our mind. That's a great symbol. There's truth in that symbol. But the moon is not an empty base up in the sky. Moon comes from the word man, M-A-N. And it means mind. Human beings weren't called humans in the Germanic tradition. They were called man. And man meant both men and women, specifically human beings. Why? Because of all the animals on the earth, human beings are the only ones that have man, or mind. So the moon represents, the moon represents the mind, not the intellect. That's Mercury. The moon represents the mind, meaning the reflection of the spirit. When you are truly meditating, you are reflecting spiritual anything, wisdom, experience, knowledge. But the moon is also our emotions. And so the divine mind, when you meditate, you experience your emotions. This is why people watch their thoughts. Because when you get past a thought, you'll find a feeling. And people watch their feelings as they come and go. This is great because then what happens is your unconscious emotions come to conscious awareness, and you can release them, and you can release the lies that are attached to them. Remember, all of the unconscious lies are lies that, they're not lies in that sense, they are false understandings that you adopt as a little kid because you're trying to protect yourself. Little kids live in really frightening circumstances with these big, immensely powerful people that walk around that sometimes really do hurt them. And they have to create these black and white belief systems in order to protect themselves. But when they are false assumptions, when they're false beliefs, they get trapped in our unconscious mind, in our fight or flight reptilian brainstem. And then when you live your life based on these false beliefs, then you become trapped in a matrix. Saturn, as I said, sniffs out all of your false assumptions and then seeks to trap you in them so that you will become so tired of living in your own self-created prison that you will wake up and you will go, I don't want to live like this anymore. I am willing to die to my own beliefs so that I can live in truth. Listen, there are people who die from illness created from their own unconscious mind, whether it be, I won't name the diseases, but you can fill in the blank. And there are people who would rather die from their physical disease than grow past their fears and their limitations, because it is so frightening, because it feels like you're dying. That's why, Kali here is the goddess of death. She's not the goddess of physical death. She's the goddess of dying to your own ego. That's why Jehovah is so into himself. That's why Saturn is Jehovah. Because Saturn is all about, the negative aspect of Saturn is all about the ego. People who worship Jehovah are worshiping their own ego, their own fearful limitations. And Saturn vibrates on that level. And when you are living in that, Saturn sends a vibration to your mind, the moon. That's the Saturn-Moon matrix. Saturn sends a vibration to your mind which is trying to wake you up from that, but because your filter is in a two-dimensional frame, you only see the fearful aspect of it, and that's what you experience. But when you get so tired of living that way and you're willing to die, that is the symbolism of escaping the matrix. Escaping the matrix is a symbol for willing to die to being a slave to the false reality you've created out of your own limitations. Do you see what I'm talking about? That the movie The Matrix is 100% true. It is a symbol. The Saturn-Moon matrix is 100% true on a two-dimensional plane. That's why Quasi-Luminous is so obsessed with a two-dimensional flat Earth. Because he is trapped in that. I'm sorry for judging you. I don't know you. He's probably going to watch this. But the reason why he's obsessed with that is because he is, in fact, trapped in his two-dimensional reptilian brain. That's why he sees symbols of it everywhere. That's why, if you've noticed, he puts people down. He says, you're a fool, you're an idiot, you're trapped, all that. Comes from that two-dimensional, negative, limited vibration of Saturn. But when you go beyond that, then Saturn becomes your best friend. So that's the explanation, short answer of how the Saturn and the moon work together. Saturn does send vibrations to your mind, and then your mind becomes limited, but it's trying to break you out of that. That's why Kali is so frightening. That's why Hela is so frightening, because it's trying to break you out of that limitation. And you know, your fear is you. Fear comes from hanging on. When you hang on to things that are falling apart, you become afraid. All right, so the next thing I want to do is I want to talk to you about that fear-based mentality. And I'm going to show you one example of how people have, their mind will take them into places that, if you really think about it, are quite ridiculous. But there's a huge following that buys into it. And I'm going to use one example from one source that has had a very profound impact on this whole Saturn moon matrix alien conspiracy thing. Before I do that, I'm going to do some business and see if there are any questions. Okay, I showed you that picture of the reptilian brain because in the Vedic mythology, I won't get into it, but if you read the mythology about how Indra, which is the Vedic vibration of Thor, it's the same word, Inthura, Thunar is the European, Thor is actually Thunar, Thu is seen in both. Inthura means Ra, king of Inthu, the full moon, means he's the king of the fully enlightened mind. And Thunar is Nar, which is first cause or lord of Thu, the mind. Thunar Inthura. So in the Vedic tradition, Indra fights against Vritra, which means constriction. And Vritra is what? He is a serpent. And it says at one point that he cuts his head off and envelops Vritra. So look at this here. What you're going to see here is the reptilian brain being enveloped by the mid and the upper cortex of the brain. When you live in fear, you live in the reptilian brain. When you mature past the fear stage, you then go to the midbrain and then the neocortex up here, where you can think objectively. That is Thor. So many people have so much misunderstanding about Thor. Thor is a god of the mind. That's why he's lord of the mind. He's lord of the moon. He is Thunar. And so all of this, here's two-dimensional thinking. Here's multi-dimensional thinking. And you notice in the middle is the emotions. So you have to process your emotions to get to the higher brain. If you can't process your emotions, you stay stuck down here. You see it? See what we're talking about? The moon is the mind. The fullness of the brain is the mind. Actually, the brain is really just a computer. But the mind is able to access the fullness of all of the brain tissue. Okay? So we're going to move on to now, I'm going to show you how if you live in a two-dimensional framework, how you can make incorrect assumptions. Once you make those incorrect assumptions, they become beliefs that are lodged in your reptilian brain, and then everything you see will be that. And Saturn, there's no coincidence that people see Saturn as the source of all of their troubles and all of their evils of mankind. There's a reason for it. Because, as we've talked about, Saturn is looking to break you out of that, and Saturn will reinforce all of your fears if you choose to live there until you get so tired of it, you break out of that. And when you break out of the matrix, you move up here into the upper parts of your mind, your brain. That's why the crown chakra is about awareness and about enlightenment. Okay? You see the connections here? I could talk for hours about all these little things, but we don't have time. I've already been talking for, 2 or 3 hours now? Been talking for, almost 2 hours. So now let's talk about one. There's a book out, I think it's called something about, anyway, I'll look at it, you'll see it here. This book here, which came out in the 70s, it's had a huge impact on the understanding of the Saturn conspiracy mindset. Okay, the Rings of Saturn. I forget what the guy's name is. Let me see if I have it on here. The Rings of Saturn. Did I write it down? I did not write it down. Let me see. I'll quickly type it into Google here and find out the guy's name. So, Rings of Saturn. Ring Makers of Saturn. Sorry, Ring Makers of Saturn is written by Norman R. Berggren. So I recommend, if you're not familiar with that book, go look it up. Not because, sorry, I'm a little pulled up. Not because I think the book has truth to it, quite the opposite. This is an example of what happens when you get stuck, even the smartest of people. Now, as opposed to David Icke, who really doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. He's throwing out what he thinks might be happening, and he doesn't have a degree in science. He doesn't know anything about science. He doesn't know anything about mythology. He interprets the mythology of the Mesopotamian mythology of the Anunnaki completely out of context. He doesn't know what he's reading. He's throwing his limited two-dimensional understandings based in his fears onto this actual mythology, which teaches something completely different. But he's an example. The Ring Makers of Saturn, Mr. Berggren, is actually, he worked for NASA. And this is his claim to fame. I don't know if he's still alive, but if he is, I believe he still goes around to alien seminars, where people are trying to prove that aliens exist. And so he's one of these experts who comes in because he worked for NASA. And so he will explain and talk about how there's this cover-up in NASA and all of that. And here's the truth of what happened with this guy. He did work for NASA. He is studied at wherever he studied and has whatever degrees he has. He knows science. And what happened is in the 70s, I think after he lost his job, I don't know how he lost his job, but if I'm remembering correctly, I could be wrong, but if I'm remembering correctly, I believe that he was kicked out of his job for some kind of his crazy theories or incompetence or something. And then what he did is he got pictures of Saturn that I believe were taken by the Cassini, whatever they sent out, the satellite that they sent out. And it sent back pictures. Now, in the 70s, we didn't have nearly the technology we do today. And so, this is the funny part. He got magazines, so if you remember back then, okay, so I was a photographer in high school, so I actually did this. What you did is you took camera with film in it, and depending on how good your lens was and how fast the film was, meaning how many pixels there were on it, the faster the film, the more light it would capture, and so those tended to be better resolution. So I don't even know what he did, but you know, he took these photos which NASA had taken and then published in magazines. So it had been printed onto paper. And what happens is you get this negative, right, that's on a film, and from that film you then project a light through it and you print it onto photographic paper, which then, I don't know what they did, but they further then printed onto actual magazine paper. So he got magazines of these, what were high resolution photographs of Saturn. He then took pictures of those pictures and blew them up, you know, had them blown up huge so that he could put them on his wall. And then what he would do then what he would do is he would take a magnifying glass and he would look at this hugely blown up picture on his wall. Now understand, the film itself has only so many pixels on it, so once you get past a certain point it's going to be pixelated and blurry, and there are going to be things on there which aren't part of the picture. They're just part of the paper or part of the film. Then once you blow it up onto the paper itself is going to have imperfections on it. Then once you take that blown up picture and then blow it up again and again and again, and remember, he's taking it from a magazine, so it's already gone through this process who knows how many times. It is going to have so many imperfections in it that once you get past a certain point blowing it up, you can't tell what you're looking at. So imagine, here's this guy, he's a college-educated, degreed scientist who worked for NASA, who somehow kind of went off his rocker and got booted out of NASA, and he is at home, it's just funny to me, he's at home looking at these blown-up photographs on his wall with a, you know, one of these handheld things. I think he might have even put it under a microscope. From there, he gets these pictures. And he writes in his book that he has proof that there are aliens living aliens living in the rings of Saturn who are mining Saturn and doing something this and that based on looking at these microscopically blown up details on these photographs. And here are some of the photographs, I believe, that are from his book. Okay, and that last one is from the Hubble spacecraft or whatever. But here's my point. By the time you get to blowing something up that big, you have no idea what you're looking at. You know, things get pixelated, and then what happens is what would normally be a straight line, because even if it's microscopic, because of the pixelated, things get all bunched up and turn into things that you can't trust your eyes at that point. The only value to those photographs is if you're looking at them way in their normal resolution from a distance. But once you know, and they're huge, they're photographs of the entire planet. He's taking little tiny chunks of these huge rings of Saturn and he's blowing them up and then trying to find something in there. And even then, you can't even tell what you're looking at. It's just like a bar or a light. Even if it were, you know, of some really good resolution, we still don't know what the hell we're looking at. He's gone so far as to say these are spaceships that are mining the mining the rings of Saturn. I mean, he comes up with all this, and then he looks at, you know, something and says that's the exhaust fumes. I mean, it's just craziness. But what happens is that this guy then writes this book, The Rings of Saturn. And because he was a NASA scientist, he has some credibility with people, of course, who aren't scientists. So here you have average people like me. Listen, I probably would have been into this book 20 years ago. 30 years ago, I probably would have read it, and I don't know what I would have thought, but I can see myself 30 years ago reading this book and totally believing it. And all I have to do is just see that he worked for NASA, and that's it. That's all I need to see. So you have this guy going around the world to these alien, conferences, and he is being presented as this whistleblower on NASA. And people are buying it hook, line, and sinker. And nobody's thinking objectively. Nobody is in this part of their brain. They're all down here. Because down here you believe what you're told. Even if what you're told is don't believe anything. Don't believe anything anybody tells you. They're all lying. Everything you see is a lie. Everything you're told is a lie. So I had this conversation with somebody, and I said something about people should be educated. People should go to college. People should read books. That doesn't mean you accept everything hook, line, and sinker. Listen, I've gone against the establishment when it comes to language and religion on a lot of things. And I can back up what I have to say. There's a lot of people who just go to college, and people in college, mathematicians, scientists, blah, 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 are still spouting a lot of the same stuff that was taught during the Middle Ages. And a lot of people aren't critical thinkers. I'm not saying that there isn't garbage in college education as well. But if you aren't filled with fear, you have the ability to take information as it's given to you and look at it objectively. Is that true? Is that not true? Does that make sense? Maybe that does. And this is why we have things called experimentation, where you experiment to find out if something is true. The flat earth theory, the people, this is hard, I don't want to put people down, but it's coming from the same place. The people who say you can't believe anything that comes from NASA because every single photograph and every single film of the moon or from the Earth from orbit is all computer graphics. And how do I know that? Because NASA is a government-run facility, and anybody in the government is part of the Illuminati, and all the Illuminati are aliens who are here to teach you false truths, and therefore everything that you hear... You see what I mean? There are so many layers of false assumptions in that belief system. People believe whatever the hell they're told because they're operating from fear. If you're that little kid who grew up in either that society or that home where you experienced this, and I did, I was one of those kids, then you have an assumption not to believe anybody in authority. Saturn is authority figures. So if you have problems, everybody that I've worked with who is a conspiracy theory junkie, when I look at their chart, I see they have major issues with Saturn. And so they experience everybody who they experience as an authority figure as somebody who is trying to deceive them, seduce them, and suck the life force out of them. And so instead of looking at things objectively, all somebody has to do is come along with this book and say to you, you know what, there are giant spaceships in the rings of Saturn that are mining Saturn, and I can prove it. Here are the pictures. So if you want to escape the matrix, you're going to have to drop all conspiracy theories that are based in this two-dimensional fear. I'm not saying there are conspiracies. All you have to do is start asking me about the Christian conspiracy. All you have to do is start getting me talking about the insurance companies and the big pharmaceuticals and the oil companies. I will be happy to talk to you about conspiracies in government and business. They exist. But you have to be more than just afraid. Those people who have partial truths, who believe that big pharmaceuticals and big oil and big government are out to lie and destroy, they're right. But you have to stop at the realm of reality. Once you start then putting on top of that the false assumption that, yeah, that's right, everybody in the government is in the Illuminati, and the Illuminatis are alien hybrid creatures, who live on Saturn and are blessed, and then you create this whole other world. There are truths in that. But once you've got all the other stuff on top of it, then you're trapped in the matrix, and then the reptilians literally control you. They give you partial truth, but they surround it with a bunch of other non-truth that you take in whole. You just swallow the whole thing, and then they can tell you the truth right to your face, and you're not a threat because you've already believed everything else. The people who are a threat are people like me, who can tell the difference between what is a true conspiracy and what's a lie. But people who can't get past their own childish two-dimensional fears, they're not a threat. So you've got to be smart about this. You've got to be able to be like Thor, who can cut off the head of the serpent and then envelop it with the rest of your brain. Okay, so I think I've talked myself out. I think I'm done with all of my ranting and raving. Let's see if there are any questions that I can answer before I get off the channel for the evening. I'm not going to say the Illuminati are people who hold ancient knowledge with too much power. How do I know that they have any ancient knowledge? This again comes from taking things at face value. This is the problem with religion. People have a book, they read the book and say, well, the Bible says this, or my teacher told me that. Well, Quasi-Luminous said this, and David Icke said that. Do you believe that because it makes sense, or do you believe that because you are afraid? I don't give the people in government that much power. I'm sorry, but Donald Trump just is not that smart. Neither is Hillary Clinton. Neither of them are that smart. I'm smarter than both of them. They have a lot of power. There are people with a lot of money who have a lot of power, but they're not that powerful. As long as you believe that people have that much power, those people will continue to run the world. But when we get smart, we won't be fooled by them. So when somebody says the Illuminati are people who have knowledge, blah, 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 that gives them way too much power. Luis, you are not that weak. You are more powerful than that. So ask yourself, are you believing these things because somebody told it to you and it makes sense to you? And are you believing it because you have an emotional connection to it? Do you have an emotional reaction when you hear talk about people saying that, the Illuminati are controlling the banks and then that way they can control you? And as whether that's true or not, put it aside. Do you have an emotional reaction, and do you buy into that because you feel powerless? It still can be true, but in order to know what the truth is, you've got to let go of the emotional attachment. When you can look at it without an emotional attachment, then you'll be able to know what is true and what is false. Then you'll be Thor. You'll be Indra. You'll be up in this part of your brain, not in this part. Don't believe everything everybody tells you, even me. I never teach anything that I don't recommend you go out and test. I give you all the Qigong stuff for free. Go out and do it. Go do the spell of the 9 knots. Go do it and see if it works. Don't take my word for it. I have proven with my own experience everything that I teach. Everything that I believe, even if I can't, prove it to you, I've experienced it and I've proven it to myself, and I recommend you do the same. But I can tell you from my experience that fear accomplishes nothing. I am in complete control of my life, everything that I have in my life, all the good things I have in my life, I have because I have, at least to some degree, have an ability to manifest my intentions. That's why I'm 54 years old, and my numbers come back when I took my blood test. The doctor said you got the numbers of a 25-year-old Olympic athlete. It's because I've accomplished that much. Listen, I'm just human like everybody else, so I'm not trying to say I'm perfect or anything. But you gotta think for yourself. Stop buying into all of this stuff, hook, line, and sinker. Take these beliefs and examine them to see how much of it is true and how much of it is false. That's critical thinking. Go back and watch my video on critical thinking. You've got to be a critical thinker. Otherwise, even if somebody's telling you 90% truth, that 10% that's based in fear will keep you trapped. Okay? All right. So let's see. Any more questions, or are we done? Yeah, see, Tom, I mean, you've said a few things. I haven't responded to them because they sound like that. It sounds, to be honest, I don't know you, but it sounds like you're just regurgitating. You know, this is the thing. This is the thing about, you know, people who think they're like in the alternate universe. They still have a club, and everybody's still repeating what everybody says within that club. So you're really not necessarily all that unique if you're just telling what somebody else said. Like if I read the book, The Ringmakers of Saturn, I go, oh, that guy's, he's a NASA, he was in NASA, this has to be true. And I just repeat what's in the book. So puppet masters are hidden. What does that mean? Does that mean they're so powerful you can't find them, and if they're hidden, then therefore they may... think about that. I'm coming from a different place. There are conspiracies out there, but they are human beings like you and me, and we can expose them. But you can't expose them if you're not operating with your whole brain. And when you do expose them, you'll find out that they're just like you and me. They're just human beings with a lot of money and a lot of influence, and they don't do anything that doesn't serve them financially. All of those people in power and all of the conspiracies that do exist revolve around one thing, which is money. And any one of us could be them or could take them down. When people stop, you know, when I'll say this about America, when the United States stops with all of the conspiracy theory and stops getting all of its knowledge about politics from InfoWars, when people stop acting out of that kind of fear, then we can take them down and take back our country. Until then, as long as people are getting all of their information from social media and InfoWars, then you will continue to have more of, you know, you'll think you're voting somebody into office who's fighting for you, and you'll find out later that they're not. Mark my words, watch what happens. Okay? All right. Let's see, what else? All right, so no more questions, so I'm done. Now that I start going into politics, it's definitely time to shut up. So I'll do a little bit more business. I'll have a final thought, and then we'll take it from there. Alrighty, so, okay, so here's what I'd like to say as we close tonight. My first recommendation, I'm willing to bet that a lot of people on here are new to the channel, or those who are watching this after it's been archived are new to the channel, because this, you know, this is an attention grabber, so I think a lot of new people will show up. The first thing I want you to do is go onto my channel, thunderwizard.com YouTube channel, and it's spelled like that, Thunderwizard, D-O-T-C-O-M. Go to the channel, not just this video. Go to the channel and then start watching the videos. You can watch them under the headings of the playlists, and just start watching them over and over again. Watch all my videos on the Matrix, on whatever else. But if you want to have the first step to power, I'm going to suggest, besides understanding the basic mental understanding, which is that you created the Matrix, and that the Matrix responds to your mental level. Whether if you're at the reptilian brainstem, you're going to create a two-dimensional prison for yourself. If you operate from up here, which is not a fear-based place, then you can create a multi-dimensional multiverse where you will be ultimately the king of your own universe. The book to get the best understanding of how to understand the universe is this one, The Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. The next thing I recommend you do is go onto my channel and start looking at the videos of the Qigong. Q-I-G-O-N-G. Q-I-G-O-N-G. I don't remember exactly what I'm called, but look at those playlists and do those practices. Empower your aura, which will also open up your mind. Energy work is Thor. Thor is the evolved mind. When you do energy work, your brain starts to get more blood, and your mind begins to expand, and your aura begins to expand. You have to have a strong aura to think with your higher mind functions. People who are weak, people who drink a lot of beer or do a lot of drugs or do a lot of things that dissipate them, who worry a lot, who obsess a lot, who think a lot, who are trapped in here, you are leaking energy and you can't think clearly when you're in fight or flight mode. If you're obsessed with conspiracies, you are in your reptilian brainstem and you are losing energy. In order to get your energy back, one of the best ways to do it is Qigong. If you want to understand how the empirical mindset, which is a conspiracy, the true conspiracy that is governing everything that we think and we do, which we can overcome, then I want you to read this book. Let's see if I can find it. Where did it go? Where is that book? Where are you? Did I get rid of it? No, there it is. Read that book. It'll tell you exactly what happened and how the monotheist conspiracy took over our entire world system, which we are now living in. If you want to know how to master time and space with one ritual and be able to open up the portals of all the 9 worlds and to create your own reality, get this DVD. And so, as I sign off for the evening, I want to ask you one last question. Which of the faces of Hela do you see? And be honest with yourself. Do you see the rotting corpse, or do you see the beautiful woman? If, like me, you like to look at beautiful women, then the only way to get there is to face the corpse, which is your fears, your false assumptions, all of your emotional attachments, all of your two-dimensional thinking. And when you die to yourself, then you will see the most beautiful the most loving, the most kind woman in the universe, and she will be, in fact, the whole universe. She will be reflected in the matrix. You will be able to intend your truest and deepest desires, and you will be able to create the universe of your dreams on all levels. So that's it for now, my friends. I'll see if there's any last minute questions that are of value to answer. Let me take a look and see. Black Earth Productions asks a very deep question, which I probably don't have time to answer, which is, what would you say is the correspondence with the runes and the cosmic law of alchemy? I would say that the runes are multifaceted. The more I work with them, the less I know them. But I know that, like the aksharas of the Vedics, the universe is composed of sound vibrations, and each one of the runes corresponds to an aspect of the universe, and when we chant the runes, we create life. That's a very short answer to your question. It's so much deeper than that, but that's a great question. What is my opinion of sun gazing? If you're doing it because of the flat earth, you know, trying to get out of the matrix, you're coming from fear, and I think that nothing should be done from fear. Sun gazing is a spiritual practice done by a lot of people, but I think the safer thing to do is to just worship the sun. The sun is your own soul. So worship the sun, do mantras to the sun. That will accomplish the same thing. But if you're trying to sun gaze because you believe you live in a flat, two-dimensional earth and that you're trapped in it and you have to do that in order to escape the archons, I would say stop doing it, because you're only feeding your fear loop and keeping yourself trapped. Don't do anything that's physically harmful. I have to say that just for legal reasons. So don't stare at the sun directly. My necklace reminds you of the Holy Grail. That's because I am wearing a moonstone. And Vedic astrology, if anybody wants to know, the planet that is guiding me to my highest path is the moon, which is why I can talk about it, which is why I can tell you I can tell you all the names of the moon in all the different languages. That's why I can intuitively tell you why Thunar is a god of the mind and the moon. It's because this is what guides me to my highest path. If you want to know your moonstone, or your gemstone, get a Vedic astrological reading from me, astrology.thunderwizard.com. Okay. Recommend use Qigong for dancing. I don't understand your question. There are, energetic dancing. I'm not sure I understand your question, so I can't answer that. But I recommend Qigong for everything. For everything that you do, I recommend Qigong. It should be a base practice for anybody who wants to be a shaman, a wizard, who wants to be healthy, who wants to be able to see. You have to have energy to be able to see. So Qigong is probably a fundamental practice for everybody in my mind. Okay, so that's it for me. I'm trying to resist this question from Theo. How do I know the moon isn't a construct of higher dimensional beings? When you drop the fear, the moon becomes very obvious. If you're asking that question, you're obviously, in my estimation, I don't know you, but if you're asking that question, you're still in two-dimensional thinking. You're still trapped. So I can say to you that I do know, but I can probably also tell you that anything that I tell you to justify my belief, if you're trapped in that flat earth matrix, fear-based, there's nothing I can say that will talk you out of that. But once you drop the fear, you know what the moon is. When you're in fear, you don't know what the moon is, and you have to come up with some kind of belief system, like it's a spaceship or it's a construct of higher beings that are in control of you and your life and your thinking. Drop the fear, man. If you need somebody to tell you what to think, then I'll tell you. That's a fear-based. You can drop it. You can choose to believe something different, and you don't have to live in fear. Anyway, I hope that wasn't offensive, but that's the best way I know how to answer your question. All right. Thank you to everybody. That's it for now. I will talk to you soon, I'm sure. Okay, that's all. Let me look at you with my actual eyes. That's all. Thank you, my friends, for the opportunity. And we shall talk soon.